This podcast is brought to you by the Prospect Research Institute, where researchers come to learn, innovate, and connect.
If you really are looking at somebody who has what to you or me is essentially unlimited wealth, the rules aren't necessarily the same. So you need to be open to asking the questions differently. Because if we're just asking how much they make and what does that mean for their potential capability, you need to think about it a little bit more from the inside out, which is, what have they done with their life? What do they want to do with the rest of their life? How do they want to be remembered after they die? That's fun because it turns them back into people.
Welcome to Prospect Research Chat Bites, a podcast by and for prospect research professionals. I'm Jennifer Filla. Today, I'm talking with Erik Hoover, founder of List Fix Prospect Research.
Hello, Erik. Thank you for joining me today on Chat Bites.
Hello, Jen. It is really a delight to be with you today.
Great. Well, before we jump into the intriguing world of family offices, I'm really hoping you'll be willing to share a little bit about your career and what you're doing now. You've had quite an interesting journey.
Yeah, I've come about this in a winding path. I've been a researcher for about 25 years, most of that time doing corporate or corporate service related intelligence or acquisitions or competitive intelligence. So all that just means doing detailed reports on companies or owners for companies. And a lot of the nuts and bolts of that will be familiar to people who do prospect research, taking a look at business organization records, property records. Even if you want to, you look at genealogical work to understand a multi-generational business. So I did really well at that, but I didn't always mesh well with the culture of the corporate world. It was fine, but I think really the lack of long-term vision was often a frustration for me. People wanted something that worked for them on a quarterly basis, and then next quarter they wouldn't even remember what they learned last quarter. And I encountered people who worked in the nonprofit world, and they said, "Oh, you're really a prospect researcher." And I said, "Oh." And I worked with them, and they said, "Oh, you're a good prospect researcher." And so I have decided to make that the rest of the story. And it's been great so far.
That's fascinating because I know competitive intelligence is a similar or parallel way to come into research. We are essentially the donor research isn't competitive, but it's certainly a lot of the same information. It's fun to hear that you're coming from competitive intelligence.
Yeah, they both appeal to the hunter and the problem solver and the tenacious investigator in me. But in the end of the day, I think the nonprofit world is offering more vision that works for me. And, I still get to do the fun work.
Right. Longer term impact. You and I have talked in the past about family offices, presented on that. And I'm curious, I don't think I know the full backstory. What's your experience with family offices?
I only had a murky understanding of the family offices, and still until I started working for startup companies. Early stage venture backed companies are often looking for high net worth individuals to act as investors. So, first in the so called angel stage, and then as limited partners or perhaps general partners in a venture capital investment. It was really important when I was working with these startups to get to know the potential partners before the meetings. So, knowing what I know about research, or feeling as I do about getting it right the first time, I found myself having to really dig into what was motivating these high risk investors. And then also, for very basic reasons, we had to try to assess what kind of capability they had to understand. It's very similar to trying to size and ask. You need to know if these people are playing with small stakes or big stakes. And you need to know what motivates them. I've used that word before, but I think it's really important that you are really trying to encapsulate a personality or a track record of activity. And that really broadened my horizons for two reasons. One was it became much more about this hidden wealth, but also track records are hidden. You don't know how big investments are. And when they're investing in startups, they're very young companies. So there may be essentially nothing on them in LexisNexis or DNB. So you have to find new ways to do that assessment, find out what is going on. And that pushed me. And that was really exciting. I think I was in a plateau up to that point. So this is in the mid 2000s. And then I had to find new, cleverer ways to understand these almost ghost-like entities. So that's true of the family offices. But again, like I'm saying, these startups where they may only have, a handful of full-time employees. How do you describe them? How do you accurately give a decision maker information about those clients of a potential investor or your competitors? There was also that aspect. So one particularly interesting example of this was when working with the board, we identified a competitor that could become a collaborator technologically. This is in advanced battery materials. There's a lot of startups doing moonshot type research. And to do that kind of research, you need tolerant investment, and this particular competitor, potential collaborator, was a pet project of one of the more successful hedge fund managers. And that helped explain to us what otherwise wouldn't have made sense, that some of the people put into key positions didn't seem as technically astute as we would think would be appropriate, or the technology they were pursuing wasn't really panning out from what we could read in the scientific literature. So what that opened my eyes to was that a family office, as an extension of the personalities of high net worth individuals can reflect several facets of a personality. There can be the cold, nuts and bolts, profit and loss approach, but there can be emotionally driven investments, the same way that we see people come from financial backgrounds become investors in the arts. We don't see that as particularly odd. That can happen in for-profit investments as well. People can say, I want to do something good for the environment, or this may be a long shot. I don't understand all the science, but this is really interesting to me. What you end up discovering is that whereas in most research, you need to close off the boundaries and say, all right, well, here's what my template says about how to describe somebody. If you really are looking at somebody who has what to you or me is essentially unlimited wealth, the rules aren't necessarily the same. So you need to be open to asking the questions differently. Because if we're just asking how much they make and what does that mean for their potential capability, you need to think about it a little bit more from the inside out. Just, what have they done with their life? What do they want to do with the rest of their life? How do they want to be remembered after they die? That's fun because it turns them back into people. Academically, I started out in anthropology, and it's good to remember that at the core of all this, it's people with their mixtures of behaviors. We don't just eat the food that is optimal for our nutrition. We want variety. And when you're looking at family offices, which have built-in structures to take care of children, to take care of properties, to take care of both philanthropic and for-profit operations, it's much more like a household or a multi-household private business. It's fascinating.
Oh, there you said it. A household business. That's the investor mentality, right? Let's run our family wealth like a business so that we have our objectives, we have our philanthropic objectives, we manage how our children are going to use this wealth and all of that stuff.
And what you and I found was really interesting as we were preparing our little talk for researchers about this was it's a fast growing sector. There is a lot of new wealth and it's happening all over the world. And we're seeing thousands of people setting up family offices every year. And that means those of us who are in a position to interact with them have to keep moving to develop our sophistication to understand what that looks like. Because with that rapid pace of growth, things will change somewhat. Some of the operational aspects may become more standardized, more commodified. I think, is going to be a limit to what the financial services industry can do to make a fully custom experience for everybody. So a lot of people are going to get off-the-shelf custom experiences for their family offices. You and I have discussed, once you start to see the big operators in financial services getting into wealth management, there's something happening, and that's what we're seeing. So I think that's something everybody in prospect research needs to keep an eye on. There's a lot of younger, more internationally diverse wealth, as well as tremendous new wealth in the markets that we're familiar with. And some of these people are younger. They may not be interested in doing things the way their parents or their grandparents might have. So we're going to have to adjust as well.
What I'm really curious about, if there's all of this growth in family offices, in wealth, we're seeing the younger people coming into a lot of wealth, whether it's earned or inherited, and managing that through family offices, the big JP Morgans and such are trying to get in on the action. How do we notice it in a profile? So if I'm researching, what am I going to see about someone? Because I feel like sometimes these people, you mentioned like ghosts, sometimes it looks like there's nothing there, but you smell it. It's like, oh, well, there was a big gift, or their parents are very wealthy. Like, how do you start following the trail? What do you do?
So the good news is this is a search heuristic that I think only people can do. So, if you're worried about AI, be confident that it won't be doing a good job of this. You need to be able to really take sort of low probability things and hold them all in your head together instead of, we're looking for zebras, we're looking for whales. And it's the opposite of what you are doing most of the time. So just the other day, I was doing some wealth verification work, and the subject was an older person who had been widowed. And I peeled back the layers, and, I could tell from the real estate, that there was substantial wealth. But only when I went back to, I think, about 2005, I found out that her husband had been the principal of one of the largest private credit businesses in the country. So that's kind of like being a loan shark. It's an incredibly profitable business. And so they sold. And like you say, you look and you're not going to see any of that, but it didn't just disappear. And if you're motivated to profile in depth, then you have to try to look for investments. And some of those investments won't be visible, but some might be. You want to look for the apparatus. So it'd be the general counsel, the accountants. In some ways, people do us a favor when they start structuring things like they were companies. So they put things into trusts, or they buy property with LLCs, or they buy businesses with a variety of LLCs that have similar names or all tie back to, a central office. It's not easy. And it's pretty similar to looking at certain kinds of private businesses in general. If somebody has a lot of real estate, commercial real estate, you're going to see each of those properties managed as an LLC typically, and you'll see common ownership if you are fortunate enough to be looking at business organization records that give you the agents for that set of companies. So it's similar. Sometimes you'll start to see hallmarks. People will refer to the relationship between the philanthropic arms and a family office organization. Regional business press does a pretty good job of this. So if you're like looking at Cranes in Chicago or some other specialized financial or business press where they know how the families are in a lot of things, and then you'll start to be able to put it together as well. The kids start their own businesses. The family has a foundation. They have, an active role in community services. That's sort of the traditional way that we've seen it. I'm really curious about what is going to happen now with the new wealth. And I know that I really need to up my game in understanding the internationalized aspects of this. There's a lot of wealth creation and more structured wealth management going on in parts of the world that I haven't been keeping up with. So that's something that I look forward to. One of the things that's made this fun, my adult life, is knowing I don't know what's on the other side of the fence. How do I figure out what's on the other side of the fence? And that could be about finding new ways to do record searching. It could be finding new resources that talk about this. It could be finding subject matter experts that I then can follow on social media or get to know in person. It's a pretty exciting time, I think, to be trying to come up to speed with family offices because there are changes afoot. And that means some more discussion will be happening in the wealth management field, in financial services, in the development world.
I really like how you talk about going back through property records and then also news articles and finding that her husband was involved in this very large business, very profitable business, and the money went somewhere. Sometimes I'll hear folks say, well, that was 10 years ago. Maybe they spent it all. And once you become familiar with how people hold wealth and what they look like when they have it, that theory falls apart because, in fact, they probably have doubled or tripled what they started with. Even if they gave like 10 million each to their kids, now they have 30 million, left in the bank.
Right.
It's hard to spend down a ton of money like that.
It's not like our grandparents consuming their nest egg and until it's all gone.
Right.
It's a different ballgame.
Yeah, and let's face it, $100,000 is different from 100 million. The interest alone.
It really is. So, I think that's a really important thing that people need to be aware of. You need to pick up a different set of tools when you're looking at the very wealthy who have made some plans to keep and grow that wealth. Now, there are exceptions. So my first college job was with an economics professor in Maryland who spent all of his considerable wealth doing something that no one else in the world was doing, which was smuggling unofficial Soviet art out of the Soviet Union. And I think about that often when I'm thinking about these people who were fortunate enough to have had a parent who got them thinking about the miracle of compound interest. But people do what they want. What is true is that more people than ever are taking responsibility in their minds for their wealth and structuring it in things like family offices or in family offices per se. I think that's part of the reason we're seeing the growth. People know that if you have $200 million, you're very lucky, but you also kind of have a problem. You have a lot of work to do, and you need to get the right people in place to be helping you do that work. You don't want to do it all yourself.
So before I let you go, I'm curious if someone wants to learn more about how people accumulate and manage their wealth, if they want to get better at recognizing what all this looks like and learning about some of the new vehicles that are created or the trends in the field, how can they do that? What are they going to need to read or watch or follow to stay current?
So they're going to want to look at the financial press, and they're going to want to look for keywords like wealth management, and they're going to want to, like we do in the philanthropic world, look for big announcements of big changes. So people sometimes will convert their hedge fund, which had been public, into a private operation. And this is news in the financial world. And they're doing that for reasons that often have to do with organizing their personal wealth around long-term goals. So you're going to want to look at Wall Street Journal, Barron's, Financial Times. You're going to want to look at academic work from the business schools on how wealthy people are getting the services they need to make these long-term goals possible. And if you do have opportunity to follow the business-oriented publications in Chicago or New York that sometimes will rate the largest private businesses. That's one of the typical things you'll see in something like Cranes. That's the outside of Silicon Valley and outside of the financial industry. That's the other place you see these fortunes, these legacies created. They can be in relatively unglamorous professions, commercial real estate, even auto dealerships. There are several extraordinarily wealthy people in this country who that's how they started, and they bought up more and more auto dealerships, and then they have got money to do all kinds of things. And then just start to look for patterns, I think, which we all do, but look for new patterns.
Thank you so much for joining me today and sharing. I appreciate it.
It's been fun. I like talking to other people in the industry because I think we're all in it because it is exciting. And I think a lot of people who don't do it don't get it. So it is my pleasure.
I thought you were going to say other people who don't do it wish they could.
No, unfortunately, it's mostly people don't really understand.
Well, thank you again.
Thanks. We'll talk soon.
That was Erik Hoover, founder of List Fix Prospect Research, talking about the growing trends in wealth and family offices. If you're interested in all things wealth and data, follow Erik on LinkedIn so you can find him when he speaks to an APRA chapter on wealth topics, but also maybe about something like a free tool you can use to quickly clean up messy data. Erik is pretty versatile in just about all things research related.